I'm Chloe, 30 years old, and 6 months ago, I got engaged to the love of my life. My mom, Victoria, offered to host a simple engagement party back in my hometown. I should have known better. That night, she handed me a glass of red wine and insisted it was a special vintage, just for you. Something didn't feel right. I switched glasses with my sister Maya when no one was looking. 30 minutes later, Maya collapsed. And in that horrifying moment, I realized the poison was meant for me. What happened next shattered everything I thought I knew about family. Before I tell you the full story, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. And if this story gripped you, don't forget to like, follow, and share. It might just help someone trust their gut before it's too late. My childhood was complicated. We lived in Beacon Hills, Massachusetts, in a sprawling colonial home that looked like it belonged on a postcard. Think manicured lawns, polished antique furniture, and a perpetual scent of lemon polish and subtle, expensive perfume. My mother, Victoria Sterling, was the architect of this perfect world. She was, still is, a force of nature, a woman for whom perfection wasn't a goal, but a baseline. Every aspect of our lives was meticulously curated, from the clothes my sister, Maya, and I wore to the extracurriculars we pursued. Even the way we spoke at the dinner table. "Chloe, sit up straight. A lady carries herself with grace," she'd admonish, her voice soft but her eyes like steel. "Chloe, your hair is far too wild. It looks unkempt. Chloe, an A- isn't acceptable for college applications. You know better than to settle." My father, Arthur Thompson, a brilliant but quiet venture capitalist, largely retreated from her iron rule. He was physically present, a silent fixture at the head of the antique dining table, but emotionally absent. He'd bury himself in his work, in his study filled with leather-bound books, rather than challenge Victoria. He was a spectator, a man who loved us, I think, but lacked the courage or perhaps the will to intervene in my mother's increasingly controlling behavior. He'd offer a fleeting sympathetic glance when Mom's criticisms landed, but never a word of defense. Then there was Maya, my younger sister by 2 years. She was the polar opposite of me, and somehow completely immune to Mom's exacting standards. Where I received constant critiques, Maya received effusive praise. My straight A's were met with a simple, expected. Maya's B's were celebrated as signs of her well-roundedness and effort. My meticulously practiced piano recitals were dissected for minor imperfections, while Maya's clumsy soccer games were events where Mom cheered louder than anyone, her perfectly coiffed hair bouncing with enthusiasm from the sidelines. The mantra that echoed through my adolescence was always, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Maya knows how to present herself. Maya understands what's appropriate. It wasn't Maya's fault, not truly. She was just as much a product of Mom's dysfunctional dynamic as I was, just on the preferred end of the spectrum. I resented her for it, for the ease with which she navigated Mom's world, even as I recognized she was also trapped, just in a different kind of gilded cage. By the time I was 16, the anxiety I'd developed had manifested in a desperate, crippling perfectionism that mirrored my mother's own. I straightened my naturally wavy hair because Mom said it looked unprofessional. I abandoned my budding passion for graphic design because it wasn't a serious career path in her eyes. I dated boys Mom approved of, sons of her country club friends, boys from good families. Despite feeling absolutely nothing for them beyond a polite indifference, each choice chipped away at the real me, leaving behind a hollow shell striving for an impossible ideal. College was my escape. I applied to programs all across the country, specifically targeting universities far enough from Beacon Hills that surprise visits from Victoria Sterling weren't feasible. I landed at the University of Washington in Seattle, a city brimming with rain and freedom. Those 4 years were nothing short of transformative. I made real friends like Brooke and Jessica, who loved me, for the quirky, authentic person I was beneath all the layers of Mom's expectations. I let my waves return, glorious and unrestrained. I pursued graphic design alongside my communications major, rediscovering a passion I thought I'd lost. I discovered who Chloe Thompson was, without Victoria Sterling's constant commentary and suffocating presence. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and utterly liberating. After graduation, I landed a job at a small, innovative tech company in San Francisco. I was designing interfaces, creating visuals that told stories, and building a life that felt authentically, wonderfully mine. At 28, I met Daniel Miller at a tiny art gallery opening in the Mission District. He was admiring an abstract piece, and I, clumsy as ever, bumped into him, spilling my mediocre wine all over his vintage denim jacket. He just laughed, a warm, genuine sound, insisted on buying me a new glass, and somehow turned a mortifying accident into our first date. Daniel was everything I never knew I needed. He was steady, incredibly kind, creatively brilliant in his work as a software engineer, and completely unthreatened by my success or my independence. He celebrated my victories, listened patiently to my anxieties, and saw the real me, not the curated version. After 2 incredible years together, he proposed on a windswept cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, the Golden Gate Bridge, a misty silhouette in the distance. He held out a simple silver ring, engraved with a tiny wave, knowing my love for the ocean. It was perfect. When I called my parents with the news, Dad offered genuine, heartfelt congratulations, his voice thick with emotion. Mom's response was typically lukewarm. A silver ring? How unconventional. I suppose diamonds are rather common these days. Despite Daniel's successful career at a cutting-edge tech firm, despite his loving, grounded family, despite our obvious happiness and deep connection, Mom found ways to express her disapproval. A software engineer? I suppose that's stable enough. Miller, is that German or Irish? San Francisco is so far from family, Chloe. You're always so distant. Planning the wedding meant navigating the minefield of family dynamics I'd happily escaped years ago. Daniel, sensing my growing stress, gently encouraged me to consider eloping, just the 2 of us. But some part of me, a small, childish part, still yearned for my family's blessing, particularly my mother's. I desperately wanted her to see my happiness, to approve, just this once. So, when Mom insisted on hosting our engagement party in Beacon Hills, I reluctantly agreed. Nothing elaborate, Mom, I told her over the phone, trying to keep my voice even. Just close friends and family, an intimate gathering. Of course, Chloe, she replied, in that tone I knew too well. The one that promised one thing and delivered the exact opposite. I understand completely. Within weeks, she'd booked Portland's most exclusive venue, the Grand Manor. She'd created an elaborate guest list that swelled to hundreds and begun micromanaging every single detail, from 3 states away. Daniel watched with growing concern as each phone call left me more anxious, my shoulders tighter, my jaw clenched. Even Maya, now married to her college sweetheart Liam and living in Portland, texted warnings. Mom's gone full momzilla over your party, Chloe. Brace yourself. I should have listened to them all. I should have trusted my instincts. But that stubborn, hopeful part of me still wanted to believe that this time would be different. That my engagement, my happiness, might finally be the thing that earned my mother's unconditional approval. How devastatingly wrong I was. The Grand Manor's grand ballroom was Victoria Sterling's idea of nothing elaborate. Crystal chandeliers shimmered, reflecting light off floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the meticulously manicured gardens of the estate. Floral arrangements of white roses and lilies, perfectly symmetrical and impossibly tall, must have cost more than my annual rent. When Daniel and I arrived for our supposedly intimate gathering, at least 150 people were already mingling, a sea of unfamiliar faces and distant relatives I barely recognized. Your mother's outdone herself, Daniel whispered, squeezing my hand supportively. He looked incredibly handsome in his charcoal suit, his dark hair freshly styled, his kind brown eyes concerned behind his glasses. We can leave any time you want. Just say the word. I smoothed down my cream-colored silk dress, one I'd chosen myself despite Mom's subtle hints about a more flattering option she'd found. It'll be fine, I said, trying to convince myself. Just a few hours, then it's over. Brooke and Jessica had flown in from San Francisco, and seeing their familiar, loving faces among the crowd of my mother's country club acquaintances was an immense relief. They hugged me fiercely, their embraces forming a protective barrier as we caught up. That woman at 3 o'clock hasn't stopped staring at you since we arrived, Brooke murmured, nudging me gently. Let me guess. Your mom. I nodded, watching Victoria make her way toward us. At 58, she remained strikingly beautiful, tall and slender, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and the kind of polished, ageless appearance that came from decades of careful maintenance and a ruthless pursuit of flawlessness. "Chloe, there you are. You're nearly 20 minutes late," she air-kissed my cheeks, her perfume expensively subtle, a whisper of jasmine and wealth. "And this dress, well, you've always had your own sense of style." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She then turned to Brooke and Jessica with a practiced society smile. "College friends, I presume. How lovely you could make the trip." Before they could respond, she'd already moved on, pulling me toward a group of her friends. "Everyone's been asking about you. The Davidson's son, Mark, is here. You remember him? Divorced now, such a shame. Daniel rescued me 20 minutes later, bringing his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, with him. Unlike my mother's cool, critical assessment, Mrs. Miller embraced me warmly. We're so thrilled you'll be joining our family, Chloe," she said, her eyes crinkling with genuine pleasure. Mr. Miller, a retired architect with Daniel's same thoughtful manner, shook my hand with both of his. "Our son's never been happier," he said simply. The contrast between the Millers' straightforward affection and my mother's complicated, conditional expectations wasn't lost on me. I caught Daniel watching the difference too, his expression a mix of sympathy and love. Maya and Liam arrived an hour into the party. My sister looked stunning, as always. Her long, light brown hair, Mom's natural color before the highlighting began, falling in perfect waves. Her emerald green dress, a color Mom approved of, I was certain, complemented her blue eyes. Liam couldn't keep his hands off her, his arm perpetually around her waist as they moved through the crowd. "Cassie," Maya broke away to hug me, her voice a delighted whisper. "This is insane, right?" "Mom said it would be small," I laughed, genuinely happy to see her. "Fair point. How are you holding up?" Before I could answer, Mom appeared between us, a perfectly manicured wedge. "Allison, darling, you look beautiful. That color is perfect with your complexion." She then turned to me, her smile tightening just a fraction. "Cassandra, the caterers need direction about the timing for the toast. I told them you'd want to handle it personally." I hadn't planned a toast, hadn't planned any of this, really, but I nodded. "Sure, Mom." As she led me toward the catering staff, I overheard her murmuring to Maya, "Try to convince your sister to put some lipstick on before the photos, won't you? She looks a bit washed out." The party progressed with the polished veneer of perfection that characterized all Victoria Sterling events. I circulated among guests I barely knew, accepted congratulations from my parents' friends, and tried to keep Daniel within arm's reach for moral support. An hour before the party was scheduled to end, I spotted Mom and Dad in what appeared to be a tense conversation near the bar. Dad looked unusually animated, shaking his head firmly while Mom's expression grew increasingly rigid. When she noticed me watching, she immediately transformed her face into a pleasant smile and said something that made Dad turn and walk away. His shoulders slumped. "Everything okay?" I asked when she approached. "Of course, dear. Your father's just being difficult about the toast." She patted my arm, a gesture that felt oddly reassuring and unsettling at the same time. "I've decided we should do it now, before people start leaving. I've asked the staff to prepare something special." She signaled to a waiter who began distributing champagne flutes to the guests. I found Daniel, and we moved to the center of the elegant ballroom. Dad appeared at Mom's side, looking uncomfortable but resigned. Maya and Liam joined us, completing the immediate family picture. Mom raised her hand, and the room, surprisingly, quieted. "We're so delighted you could all join us to celebrate Chloe and Daniel's engagement," she began, her voice carrying perfectly across the hushed room. "Arthur and I couldn't be prouder." Dad nodded stiffly beside her, a shadow of weariness in his eyes. I felt Daniel's hand tighten around mine, a silent anchor. "Before Arthur gives the official toast," Mom continued, though this was clearly news to Dad, "I wanted to offer a special toast just for our immediate family." She turned to a server who carried a tray with 5 glasses, 4 champagne flutes, gleaming with golden liquid, and 1 solitary dark red glass of wine. "Champagne gives Chloe headaches," Mom explained to the puzzled looks from Daniel's parents and some closer family friends. This wasn't true. I'd never had a champagne headache in my life. "So I've selected a special vintage just for her." She handed the red wine to me with that strange smile again, lips curved but eyes watchful, almost anticipatory. The champagne flutes went to Daniel, Dad, Maya, and Liam. I stared at the dark liquid in my hand, a sudden cold wave of uneasiness washing over me. The wine's color seemed normal, but when I lifted it to my nose, something smelled off. Not just corked, but wrong. There was an underlying medicinal scent beneath the familiar grape and oak notes, a faint chemical tang that sent a shiver down my spine. Mom was watching me intently, her gaze unwavering. "A toast," she said, raising her flute, her voice light and clear. "To new beginnings." Everyone lifted their glasses. In that split second, a decision, an instinct born from years of hypervigilance under my mother's roof, surged to the forefront. As Maya turned to whisper something to Liam, her attention momentarily diverted, I smoothly, almost imperceptibly, switched our glasses. The champagne flute was now in my hand, the red wine glass in hers. "To new beginnings," we all echoed, the words a joyous chorus that felt strangely discordant in my ears. Maya, distracted by Liam's comment, didn't notice the switch. She sipped the red wine with a contented sigh as I brought the champagne flute to my lips, feeling my mother's eyes on me the entire time, a burning, almost impatient stare. For the next half hour, the party continued normally, a symphony of polite chatter and clinking glasses. I mingled with guests, posed for photos with Daniel, my smile fixed, and tried to ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Every few minutes, I'd catch Mom watching me with a puzzled expression, a slight furrow in her brow, as if waiting for something that wasn't happening. Her gaze would linger, then dart away, only to return a moment later. It was unnerving. Daniel and I were speaking with his parents, discussing our honeymoon plans, when I noticed a commotion across the room. Liam was supporting Maya, who seemed unsteady on her feet. At first, I thought she might have had too much to drink, but Maya rarely had more than one glass of anything, especially not at a family event where Mom was scrutinizing every move. Her face was pale, and she was swaying slightly. "Excuse me," I said to the Millers, already moving toward my sister, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Daniel followed close behind, his hand immediately on the small of my back, sensing my shift in mood. By the time we reached them, Maya's condition had visibly worsened. Her words slurred together as she tried to tell Liam she felt strange, a weird buzzing in her head, her limbs feeling heavy. Her eyes couldn't seem to focus, darting around erratically, and a thin sheen of sweat had broken out across her forehead despite the room's cool temperature. Her face was clammy. "Something's wrong," Liam said, alarm clear in his voice, his arm wrapped tightly around Maya's waist to keep her upright. "She's only had that one glass of wine, and maybe half a glass of water all night." Mom appeared beside us, seemingly out of nowhere, her face showing what appeared to be genuine shock and concern. "What's happening? Is Allison all right?" Before anyone could answer, Maya lurched forward, her stomach clenching. "Bathroom," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. I immediately took her other arm, and together, Liam and I guided her through the now watching, hushed crowd toward the ladies' room. We barely made it inside before Maya collapsed to her knees in front of a toilet, violently ill. I held her hair back, my heart pounding, exchanging worried glances with Liam, who hovered anxiously in the doorway, his own face ashen. "This isn't normal," I said, as Maya continued retching, her body convulsing. "This isn't just alcohol. She's too sick." "I'm calling 911, Liam decided, pulling out his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed. Maya's condition deteriorated rapidly. Between bouts of sickness, she complained of dizziness, extreme fatigue, and a strange numbness in her extremities, specifically her hands and feet. By the time the paramedics arrived, the elegant engagement party had dissolved into chaos. Guests were ushered out by hotel staff, murmuring amongst themselves, as the medical team worked on Maya with urgent efficiency. They asked rapid-fire questions. What had she consumed? Did she have any allergies? Was she on medication? Liam, pale and distraught, answered what he could, his voice strained. But when they asked specifically about the red wine, I felt a cold, horrifying realization wash over me, a truth I hadn't dared to articulate even to myself. "The wine," I said quietly to Daniel, as they carefully loaded Maya onto a stretcher, her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow and irregular. "It was meant for me. I switched our glasses because it smelled strange. Daniel's face paled, his eyes widening in disbelief and dawning horror. Are you saying— I don't know what I'm saying, I interrupted, my voice trembling, not ready to voice the unspeakable suspicion that was forming in my mind. But something's very wrong. It felt wrong from the moment she handed it to me. Mom insisted on riding in the ambulance with Maya and Liam, her composure strangely intact despite the escalating crisis. Dad followed in his car, looking shell-shocked, his usual placid expression replaced by a mask of deep concern. Daniel drove me to the hospital, neither of us speaking much during the journey. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. The details of Mom's behavior, the strange smile, the insistent special vintage, they coalesced into a terrifying pattern. What exactly did you smell in the wine? Daniel finally asked, his voice low as we parked in the hospital garage. Something medicinal, I replied, the memory making my stomach clench. Like cough syrup, but sharper, more chemical. And it was dark, almost opaque, even for a red wine. I turned to him, fear evident in my voice, raw and unadulterated. Daniel, who would want to drug me? At my own engagement party? The question hung between us, neither of us willing to voice the answer that was becoming increasingly, horrifyingly clear. The hospital waiting room was a tableau of family tension, a stark contrast to the elegant ballroom we'd just left. Dad paced nervously, a restless shadow, while Mom sat perfectly still on a beige plastic chair, her posture rigid, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Liam stood by the doorway, alternating between checking his phone for updates and asking the frantic nurses for news. Daniel and I sat slightly apart from my parents, his arm around my shoulders, a comforting weight that grounded me amidst the swirling anxiety. Family of Allison Brooks, a doctor finally called, his voice tired but clear. We all stood, a collective gasp escaping our lips. Maya's full name was Allison Brooks. The doctor explained that Maya had been drugged. Tests showed a significant amount of sedatives in her system, along with another substance they were still identifying. The combination, he said, had caused her severe adverse reaction, compromising her respiratory system and vital signs. Had she taken any medication today? Anything that might have interacted with alcohol? The doctor asked, his gaze sweeping over us. No, nothing, Liam answered firmly, his voice cracking with emotion. Maya doesn't even take aspirin unless she absolutely has to. She's meticulous about what she puts in her body. Then I'm afraid we're looking at a potential case of intentional drugging, the doctor said gravely, his eyes serious. We've already notified the police, as is standard procedure in such circumstances. Mom let out a small, sharp gasp, her hand flying to her mouth, though her eyes remained oddly devoid of genuine shock. Dad placed his hand on her shoulder, his expression unreadable, a mix of concern and something else I couldn't quite decipher. 2 police officers, a male and a female detective, arrived shortly after, taking preliminary statements from everyone, their faces grim. I sat with Daniel, watching the family drama unfold with a growing sense of dread, the pieces of the terrifying puzzle clicking together in a pattern I didn't want to acknowledge. I need to tell them, I whispered to Daniel after the officers had spoken briefly with my parents, their attention now shifting toward Liam. About switching the glasses, Daniel nodded gravely, his gaze firm. I think you do, Cassie. It's crucial. When the officers approached us, their notepads out, I took a deep, shaky breath and told them everything. The strange red wine, the odd medicinal smell, my split-second instinctual decision to swap glasses with Maya. I watched their expressions shift, from routine questioning to serious, focused concern. And why did you feel the need to swap glasses, Miss Thompson? The female officer, Detective Miller, asked, her voice calm but penetrating. I hesitated, acutely aware of my parents within earshot, particularly my mother's silent, rigid presence across the room. Instinct, I guess, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Something just felt wrong, like a deep primal warning. Did you have any reason to believe someone might want to harm you? The male officer, Detective Hayes, asked, his brow furrowed. Again, I paused. How much could I say? How much did I even understand myself? Not specifically, no, I began. Then Daniel squeezed my hand. Tell them your concerns, Chloe, he urged gently, his eyes unwavering. The officers looked at me expectantly, patiently. I lowered my voice, though I knew Mom's ears were incredibly sharp. The wine came directly from my mother, I explained, each word feeling like a betrayal, yet knowing it was necessary. She specifically brought it for me, saying I get headaches from champagne, which isn't true, and she'd been acting strangely all night, even more so than usual. Overly insistent, almost obsessive about the toast. Detective Hayes glanced over at my mother, who was now speaking intently with Dad, her hand on his arm, her expression carefully composed. "We'll need to investigate this further, Miss Thompson," he said. "Would you be willing to provide a formal statement tomorrow, after your sister is stable?" I nodded, feeling like I was crossing a line, a chasm, that I could never retreat back over. This wasn't just about a party or a family argument anymore. This was serious. This was potentially criminal. While the police spoke with hospital staff, taking additional notes, I pulled Dad aside to a quiet corner of the waiting room, away from Mom's vigilant eyes. "Dad," I whispered, my voice urgent, raw. "I need to know the truth. What's been going on with Mom? What was that conversation you had near the bar?" His face seemed to age years in seconds. He ran a hand through his thinning gray hair, his shoulders slumping further. "Chloe, your mother hasn't been herself lately," he said, his voice a low, tired rumble. "She's been fixated on your engagement in ways that aren't healthy." "What does that mean, not healthy?" I pressed, my heart pounding. "She's been saying things about Daniel not being right for you." He looked away, his gaze distant, unfocused. "About how you're making a mistake, moving so far, building a life that doesn't center around her. She said he's weak, that he encourages your ridiculous independence." He finally met my gaze, his eyes filled with a deep, weary regret. "I thought it was just her being controlling, Chloe, as usual. I never imagined she'd go this far." He couldn't finish the sentence, his voice catching. "Has she seen anyone? A therapist?" I asked, a desperate hope flickering within me. Dad laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the sterile waiting room. "You know your mother, Chloe. Therapy is for other people, for those who can't handle their problems. She's always said that. I've suggested it for years. She just dismisses it." Our conversation was interrupted when Liam called out from Maya's room, his voice filled with relief. "She's awake. She's asking for family." As we all moved toward her room, a police officer, a different one, a uniformed patrolman, stopped Mom. "Mrs. Sterling, we'd like to ask you a few more questions if you don't mind." Mom's face remained perfectly composed, a mask of sophisticated nonchalance, but I caught the flicker of panic in her eyes, a brief, almost imperceptible tremor that gave her away. "Of course, officer," she replied, her voice smooth, poised. "Though I don't see how I can help. This is all just a terrible misunderstanding. My daughter simply had too much to drink, I imagine." While she spoke with the police, the rest of us entered Maya's room. My sister looked frighteningly pale against the crisp white hospital sheets, an IV dripping fluids into her arm. Liam immediately went to her side, gently taking her hand, his relief palpable. "What happened?" Maya asked weakly, her voice hoarse, her eyes still a little unfocused. I exchanged glances with Dad and Liam, unsure how much to say, how much she was ready to hear. Before any of us could respond, a nurse entered with Detective Miller. "We need to check Mrs. Sterling's personal belongings, including her purse. If she left it in the room," the officer explained calmly but firmly. "Standard procedure in cases like this." Mom's elegant designer purse sat on a chair where she'd left it before being taken for questioning. Detective Miller, her face serious, put on gloves and carefully opened it, meticulously cataloging the contents. Among the expected items, a sleek wallet, a perfectly new smartphone, an array of expensive makeup, was a small leather-bound book. "What's that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Appears to be a diary," the officer said, her expression unreadable as she carefully placed it into an evidence bag. A diary. I'd never, in my entire life, known my mother to keep one. Victoria Sterling was far too private, far too image-conscious to commit her thoughts to paper. The discovery felt ominous, like finding a venomous snake hidden in a beautiful floral arrangement. It whispered of hidden depths, of secrets simmering beneath that polished facade. As the officer left with the bagged items, I turned back to Maya, who was watching me with confused, hurt eyes. Her brow was furrowed, her gaze surprisingly direct. "Chloe, did you switch our drinks?" she asked quietly, her voice still weak, but clear. The directness of her question stunned me into silence. In that moment, I realized there was no going back. The truth was emerging, whether I was ready for it or not. The carefully constructed world of our family, built on denial and unspoken truths, was crumbling, brick by agonizing brick. The hospital waiting room became our family's temporary headquarters as we waited for updates on Maya's condition and the police investigation. Daniel's parents had arrived, providing a steady, calm presence that contrasted sharply with the roiling chaos of the Thompson-Sterling family. Mr. Miller brought coffee for everyone, his quiet kindness highlighting how rare such simple, unconditional gestures were in my own family. Mrs. Miller sat beside me, occasionally patting my hand without demanding explanations or offering unwanted advice, simply radiating a quiet, comforting support. The doctor confirmed it was a mix of sedatives and something they're still identifying, Liam announced, returning from speaking with medical staff. His face still pale, but his voice holding a hint of relief. They're keeping her overnight for observation, but she should recover fully. No long-term damage, thank God. Relief washed over us, a wave of profound gratitude, followed quickly by the grim reality of why we were all there. Two detectives, Detective Miller and Detective Hayes, had replaced the uniformed officers, and they were now interviewing each of us separately in a small windowless consultation room. When it was my turn, I repeated my story, the strange wine, the impulsive switch, the growing, sickening suspicion that my mother had intended to drug me. "Can you think of any reason your mother would want to incapacitate you, Miss Thompson?" Detective Miller asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Her gaze was direct, unwavering. "She's always been controlling," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "But this is beyond anything I could have imagined, beyond anything she's ever done." "We found this in your mother's purse," Detective Hayes said, his voice flat, sliding a photocopy across the table toward me. It was a page from Mom's diary, dated just 3 days earlier. Her elegant, looping script filled the page, words that would forever burn themselves into my memory. "Chloe continues with this ridiculous engagement. Daniel is completely wrong for her, too soft, too accommodating of her independence. If the party doesn't change her mind, more direct measures may be necessary. Arthur is useless as always, doing nothing to intervene." I stared at the words, my worst fears confirmed, yet raising a whole new torrent of questions. A cold dread seeped into my bones. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. "There's more," Detective Hayes continued, his voice softer, perhaps sensing my shock. "Earlier entries suggest your mother has been planning to disrupt your engagement for months. Some entries even mention specific drugs she researched online, their effects, their dosages." The room seemed to tilt slightly, the air growing heavy, suffocating. Has she been arrested?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Not yet," Detective Miller replied. "We're building our case. Your sister's toxicology report will be crucial evidence, confirming the substances and their concentration. But yes, she's at the station now, for formal questioning." When I returned to the waiting room, Daniel immediately wrapped his arm around me, his concern etched on his face. "What did they say, Cassie?" I showed him the diary photocopy. His face darkened as he read it, his jaw clenching. "Chloe, this is serious. Your mother needs help. Professional help. This isn't just control anymore." "I know," I whispered, leaning into his strength, the words a raw confession. "I just can't believe she'd go this far." Dad was interviewed next. When he returned, his face was ashen, drained of all color. He sank into a chair across from me, looking suddenly old and defeated, his shoulders slumped like a man carrying an unbearable weight. "Did you know?" I asked him directly, my voice quiet, almost accusatory, though I tried to keep the judgment out of it. "About what Mom was planning, or about the diary?" "No," he said, his voice cracking, barely audible. "Not about this, not about the drugs. But I knew she wasn't well, Chloe. I've known for years, decades." He looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. "And I did nothing. I just adapted around her behaviors, made excuses. For myself, for her. I prioritized the peace of the household over your well-being, over my own courage. He covered his face with his hands, his body shaking with silent sobs. This is my fault too, Chloe. I let it happen. I enabled her. Mr. Thompson, Daniel said carefully, his voice gentle but firm. Elizabeth needs psychiatric help. This goes beyond controlling behavior. This is a severe mental illness. Dad nodded, tears now openly streaming down his face. They showed me the diary. There were things in there. He trailed off, unable to voice the devastating revelations. Things about all of us. Her simmering resentment toward you, Chloe, for escaping her influence, for daring to build your own life. Her almost obsessive fixation on Maya as the good daughter, the one she could still mold. Her utter contempt for me, for my perceived weakness, for not controlling you girls more tightly. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading for understanding, for forgiveness. I'm so sorry, Chloe. I failed you girls. I failed your mother too. The police had taken Mom to the station for formal questioning, the gravity of the situation sinking deeper with every passing minute. Liam had returned to Maya's room, leaving Daniel, my father, and me to process the unfathomable truth that had shattered our family's reality. I need to see Maya, I said finally, needing to connect with my sister, to reassure myself she was okay, to process this together. Dad nodded, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. She's asked for you. When I entered Maya's room, Liam tactfully stepped out to give us privacy, closing the door softly behind him. My sister looked better. Some color had returned to her cheeks, though she still appeared utterly exhausted, fragile. Is it true? She asked immediately, her voice still weak, but her eyes locked onto mine, direct and searching. Did Mom try to drug you? And I got it instead. I sat beside her bed, taking her hand in mine. Her fingers felt cold, thin. It looks that way, Maya. The police found her diary. She's been planning to sabotage my engagement. She specifically said Daniel was wrong for me, that she needed to take more direct measures if the party didn't change my mind. Maya's eyes filled with tears, spilling over onto her pale cheeks. Why, Chloe? Why would she do that? To you? To us? She's not well, Maya, I said, squeezing her hand. The words a difficult truth. I think she hasn't been for a long, long time. What we always thought was just Mom being Mom, or her perfectionism. It's something much deeper, much darker. But I never saw it, Maya whispered, her voice laced with pain and a dawning, terrible realization. She was always so normal with me, so loving, so proud, I just didn't see it. I squeezed her hand again, a silent acknowledgement of our different experiences. That's because you were the good daughter, Maya. The one who did everything she wanted, who fit perfectly into her mold. I was the one who fought back, who left, who forged my own path. I was the defiance she couldn't control. I didn't know it was that bad for you, Maya admitted, her voice filled with a profound sorrow, a regret. I honestly thought you were just being dramatic when you complained about her. I thought you were exaggerating her criticisms, her control. She always said you were sensitive. The hurt of that statement, of years being dismissed as dramatic or sensitive when I was actually being subtly, consistently abused, hit hard, a sharp, familiar pang. But this wasn't the time for that conversation, not for airing old grievances. The immediate crisis overshadowed everything. It doesn't matter now, Maya, I said, trying to push past the sting. What matters is that you're okay. And that Mom gets help, real help. Maya looked at me with new understanding, a raw, vulnerable look I'd rarely seen on her carefully composed face. You saved me, you know, she said, her voice trembling slightly. The doctor said with my lower body weight. If I'd had the full dose she intended for you, it could have been much worse. He said I was lucky you didn't have it. I hadn't considered that, not in the chaos of the hospital. How my split-second decision, an action driven purely by an uneasy instinct, might have actually prevented an even greater tragedy, saved my sister's life. The thought was sobering, chilling in its implications. We sat in silence for a moment, two sisters, usually so distant, so shaped by our mother's manipulations, recalibrating their shared history in light of these devastating new revelations. The comfortable silence between us was profound, a sign of a new beginning for our fractured bond. What happens now? Maya finally asked, her voice softer, more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. I don't know, I answered honestly, the uncertainty a heavy cloak. But things can't go back to the way they were. They absolutely can't. As if on cue, there was a commotion in the hallway outside Maya's room. Raised voices, one of them unmistakably my mother's, echoed through the door. I demand to see my daughter, Mom was saying, her voice laced with a dangerous edge of indignation. This is ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong. The door burst open, and there she was. Victoria Sterling, perfectly put together despite the circumstances. Her hair still immaculate, her clothes uncreased, her face a mask of righteous indignation that faltered only slightly when she saw Maya and me together, our hands still clasped. It was time for the confrontation I'd been avoiding my entire life, the final unavoidable collision. Allison, darling, are you all right? Mom rushed to Maya's bedside, her eyes wide with what seemed like exaggerated concern, completely ignoring me, acting as if I wasn't even in the room. This whole situation is a terrible misunderstanding. I've been explaining to the officers. Maya shifted away from her touch, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement that didn't go unnoticed by Mom, whose eyes narrowed slightly before her expression smoothed back into performative concern. Mom, I said firmly, stepping forward, standing my ground, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. We need to talk about what happened tonight. There's nothing to discuss, Chloe, she replied, her voice perfectly controlled, reasonable, almost bored. Clearly someone at the catering company made a dreadful mistake with the beverages, an unfortunate oversight. It was the voice she'd used my entire life to make me doubt my own perceptions, to twist reality, to make me question my sanity. The police found your diary, I said quietly, deliberately. The change was instantaneous. Mom's carefully composed face froze, the polite mask shattering. A flicker of raw panic crossed her features, undeniable, before she recovered. Her eyes hardening. That's private property. They had no right, she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. They had every right, Liam said from the doorway, where he'd been listening, his arms crossed, his stance protective. Your daughter was poisoned, Mrs. Sterling. That gives them every right to investigate. Poisoned? Mom laughed, the sound brittle, unconvincing, like glass shattering. That's absurdly dramatic, Liam. It was a mild sedative, nothing dangerous. Just something to calm the nerves. For Chloe, of course, she gets so anxious. The admission hung in the air, a shocking, undeniable truth. We all stared at her, Maya, Liam, Dad, Daniel, and me, the pretense of innocence shattered by her own careless words. The calm, manipulative veneer was cracking, showing the raw, desperate woman underneath. So you did put something in the wine, Maya said, her voice small, hurt, filled with a terrible sadness. You just admitted it. Mom seemed to realize her mistake, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. She backtracked quickly, frantically. I meant hypothetically, if anything was in the wine, which I'm not saying there was. It was an analogy, nothing more. Stop lying, Mom, I interrupted. Years of pent-up frustration, of being gaslighted, of being made to feel invisible, breaking through my carefully constructed composure. Stop manipulating us. Stop gaslighting us all. Just stop. How dare you speak to me that way, Chloe, she hissed, her mask slipping further, revealing the raw anger beneath. After everything I've done for you, everything I've sacrificed. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? I asked, my voice rising, mirroring her intensity. Criticized me, controlled me, made me feel like I was never good enough, made me believe I wasn't worthy of love unless I was the version of me you approved of? I pushed you to be your best, she countered, her eyes blazing, indignant. If it weren't for me, you'd have settled for mediocrity. You'd be stuck in this town. If it weren't for you, I might have actually believed in myself years ago, I shot back, the words tearing out of me. Daniel was the first person who made me feel worthy of love without conditions, who celebrated my independence, and you couldn't stand it, could you? You couldn't stand that I had found happiness outside of your control. Mom's face contorted with pure rage, a terrifying mask of fury. Daniel is wrong for you. He's weak. He lets you make your own decisions. He encourages your ridiculous independence. He's destroying everything I built, everything I gave you. Everything you built? I echoed incredulously, a harsh, bitter laugh escaping me. You mean the prison of expectations you trapped me in? The constant criticism, the impossible standards. That was your legacy for me, Mom. You were breaking me down, not building me up. My voice dropped, thick with pain and accusation. And when you couldn't control me anymore, when I finally found a way out, you tried to drug me at my own engagement party to take me out of commission. Mom's composure cracked completely, shattering into a million pieces. Her face was contorted, desperate, raw. It was just supposed to make you sick enough to go home early, she blurted out, the words tumbling out in a torrent of confession. To miss that ridiculous after-party Daniel's friends planned where they were going to convince you to move the wedding to San Francisco. To move you even further away. The specificity of the statement stunned me into silence. How did she know about that? We hadn't told her about the after-party or the subtle conversations about possibly shifting the main wedding ceremony to the West Coast. How did you know about that? I demanded, my voice sharp with dawning realization. We didn't tell you about the after-party. You didn't even know about the main wedding idea. A trapped, hunted look crossed her face. I have my ways of knowing things, she mumbled, her eyes darting nervously. You read my texts, I realized, the pieces clicking into place, a new wave of violation washing over me. When I went to the bathroom, you checked my phone. You went through my bag at the hotel earlier, didn't you? She didn't deny it. Instead, she switched tactics, turning to Maya, her voice regaining some of its manipulative sweetness. Allison, darling, surely you understand. I was protecting our family, keeping us together. Chloe was going to move even farther away, start a new family that didn't include us. That didn't need me, Maya shook her head slowly, her eyes wide with horror and a growing understanding. Mom, I moved to Portland. I started my own family with Liam. That's normal, Mom. That's healthy. That's different, Mom insisted, her voice rising in pitch, desperate. You visit regularly. You call every week. You include me in your life. You need me. Because you never made me feel guilty for having my own life, Mom, Maya said, her voice quiet but firm, a dawning realization transforming her face. You controlled me with praise, not criticism. But it was still control. You love the version of me you created, the one that needed your approval. You hate the version of Chloe that escaped your control. Mom's face flushed with anger, her desperation morphing back into fury. You have no idea what you're talking about. Neither of you do. You're both ungrateful. I did everything for you. The monitor tracking Maya's heart rate beside her bed began beeping faster, its insistent rhythm echoing the escalating tension in the room. Liam moved immediately to her side, his concern evident, placing a calming hand on her arm. You need to leave, he told Mom firmly, his voice low, controlled, but unwavering. You're upsetting my wife, who is here because of you. This is a family matter, Mom said dismissively, waving him off as if he were an annoying fly. I am family. And right now, I'm asking you to leave, Liam replied, stepping between Mom and Maya's bed, his stance protective. Before I call hospital security. Mom looked to Dad, who had been standing silently in the doorway throughout the confrontation, his face a mixture of anguish and shame. Arthur, say something. Tell them I'm right. Dad straightened his shoulders, something I'd rarely seen him do in Mom's presence, an act of defiance that spoke volumes. His voice, though quiet, was clear and firm. Victoria, that's enough. You need help. Real help. Help? She scoffed, a wild, almost hysterical look in her eyes. I'm the only one thinking clearly here. Chloe is making a terrible mistake, and none of you can see it. None of you understand. The only mistake I made was letting you control my life for so long, I said quietly, the words weighted with years of silent suffering, and inviting you to be part of my engagement party. I wish I hadn't. Mom's eyes widened, her breathing becoming erratic, shallow. You don't mean that. You need me. You've always needed me. No, Mom, I replied, shaking my head, a profound sense of clarity washing over me. You needed me to need you. There's a difference, a huge difference. Something in her seemed to snap. Her composure, already hanging by a thread, shattered completely. She lunged toward me, her eyes wild, grabbing my shoulders with surprising strength, her fingers digging into my silk dress. You ungrateful, selfish girl. After everything I've sacrificed for you, Daniel and Dad both moved at once. A coordinated blur, pulling Mom away from me, breaking her grip. She fought against their restraint, her carefully constructed image completely shattered as she shouted accusations and threats, her voice rising to a shriek. "You'll see, you'll all see. I was right. You'll regret this." A security guard appeared in the doorway, alerted by the commotion, followed by a concerned nurse. "What's going on here?" "This woman tried to assault my fiancé," Daniel explained, still holding Mom's arm, his face grim. "She's also the one who drugged her other daughter, the patient." The security guard, a burly man with a calm demeanor, spoke into his radio, requesting police presence. Mom's struggles increased, her voice becoming a desperate wail. "This is ridiculous. I am Victoria Sterling. Do you know who I am in this community? You can't do this to me." Her hysteria, her wild accusations, only confirmed what we were all now seeing clearly. A woman who had hidden severe, untreated mental illness behind a facade of perfectionism and rigid control for decades. The police arrived minutes later, the same detectives who had interviewed us earlier. After assessing the chaotic situation, they informed Mom she was being taken into custody on suspicion of attempted poisoning and assault. "You can't do this to me," she said, but her voice had lost its commanding edge, replaced by something closer to raw fear, a primal terror. "Arthur, don't let them do this." Dad looked at her, his face etched with profound sadness, resignation, and a terrible regret. "I'm sorry, Victoria. I should have gotten you help years ago, for all of us." As they led her away, her hands cuffed behind her back, Mom locked eyes with me one last time, her gaze burning with a mixture of hatred and a chilling, unwavering conviction. "This isn't over, Chloe. You'll see. I was right. You'll come crawling back." The room fell silent after she left, the echoes of her screams hanging in the air. Maya was crying quietly, Liam holding her hand, stroking her hair. Dad stood motionless, looking utterly lost, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the empty doorway. Daniel's arm around my waist was the only thing keeping me upright, the only thing tethering me to reality. "I never thought it would end like this," Dad finally said, his voice hollow. "It hasn't ended, Dad," I replied. The words a quiet promise, a declaration of intent. This is just the beginning of a different chapter, for all of us. That night in the hospital waiting room, as Maya slept under observation and Mom spent her first night in police custody, I finally allowed myself to break down. Daniel held me as years of suppressed pain, of silent suffering, of living under the crushing weight of Mom's expectations, poured out of me in wrenching sobs. "I should have seen it coming," I choked out, tears streaming down my face, hot and cleansing. "All the signs were there. I knew something was wrong with her. I've always known." "This isn't your fault, Chloe," Daniel said firmly, his voice steady, his embrace strong. "You couldn't have predicted this. You couldn't have prevented it any earlier. You were a child." "But I knew something was wrong with her," I insisted, the guilt a suffocating blanket. "Knowing something and being able to prevent it are different things entirely," he said, gently brushing my hair back from my tear-streaked face. "You did the right thing when it mattered most. You trusted your instincts, Chloe. And you likely saved both yourself and Maya from worse harm, maybe even saved her life." As my tears subsided, I felt something unexpected rise within me, a profound sense of liberation mixed with the grief and shock. The truth, as painful and shattering as it was, had finally broken through decades of pretense, of denial, of living a carefully constructed lie. And in that broken open space, maybe, just maybe, genuine healing could begin. The weeks following what the family now referred to simply as the incident unfolded like scenes from someone else's life, a surreal, high-stakes drama. Mom underwent psychiatric evaluation while in custody, resulting in a diagnosis that explained so much. Narcissistic personality disorder with paranoid features, exacerbated by untreated anxiety and likely other underlying issues. The district attorney's office charged her with attempted poisoning, assault, and possibly other counts depending on further evidence. Her lawyer immediately began building a case around diminished mental capacity, citing her long history of unchecked mental illness. While our family grappled with what justice would look like in this unprecedented situation, the legal system ground slowly forward. The DA wants to know if you'll testify, Dad told me over coffee in a neutral downtown cafe, far from our family home. He'd lost weight, the strain of recent events evident in the new lines etched around his eyes, in the tremble in his hands as he held his cup. They say your testimony, your direct experience, would strengthen their case considerably. And if I don't? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The weight of that decision felt immense. He sighed heavily, looking out the window at the bustling street. The charges might be reduced. Victoria could potentially serve minimal time, possibly just probation with mandatory psychiatric treatment at a facility. Her lawyer is pushing for that. The decision weighed on me, a heavy burden. Part of me, the part that had endured years of emotional abuse culminating in that final, dangerous act, wanted accountability, consequences. I wanted her to face the full force of her actions. Another part, however, recognized that my mother was ill, truly, profoundly ill, and had likely been so for most of my life. Was punishment truly the answer for a broken mind? What would bring me peace? What would you do, Dad? I asked him, searching his face for guidance. For wisdom he seemed to have only recently found himself. He stared into his coffee cup, swirling the dark liquid. I failed you girls, Chloe, by enabling her behavior for decades, by being silent, by protecting myself from her wrath, instead of protecting you. I'm not the person to advise you on this. I don't know what's right anymore. He looked up, his eyes damp with unshed tears, but his gaze now clearer, more direct than I'd ever seen it. But as your father, I'll say this. Whatever you decide needs to be for your healing, not for punishment, not for revenge. Those won't bring you peace, only more bitterness. Daniel's parents had invited us to stay with them while in Beacon Hills, offering a sanctuary from the relentless media attention the case had attracted. Prominent society woman drug's daughter at engagement party blared the headlines, and reporters had begun calling my work and Daniel's, hounding our friends. The media circus was suffocating. We should go back to San Francisco, I told Daniel one evening, as we sat on the Miller's quiet porch, the sound of crickets a soothing balm. I can't hide here forever, and I need to reclaim my life, not let this define me. Are you sure you're ready? He asked, his brow furrowed with concern, always putting my well-being first. No, I admitted. A raw honesty. But I need to. And I need to use my journalism background to get ahead of the story before it defines me. To tell it my way. Daniel smiled, that proud look that always made my heart skip a beat. A look of unwavering belief. That's my Chloe. That's the woman I fell in love with. We decided to give one exclusive interview to a respected national journalist, a woman known for her thoughtful pieces on mental health and social issues. We would tell our story on our own terms, control the narrative. I was nervous, my hands clammy, but determined. As the cameras set up in the Miller's living room, the journalist, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, advised me, just be honest, Chloe. People connect with authenticity. They need to hear your truth. So I was honest. Brutally, painfully honest. I spoke about growing up with a mother whose love was conditional, a prize to be earned, never a given. About escaping to build my own life, brick by painful brick. About the engagement party that exposed decades of dysfunction, a hidden illness that had silently poisoned our family. I didn't vilify Mom. Instead, I emphasized her untreated mental health issues and the family's complex hope for her recovery, for a different future, however uncertain. The piece aired a week later to a sympathetic, overwhelming response. Messages of support flooded my social media, many from people with similar family experiences, children of narcissistic parents, or those dealing with addiction and mental illness within their own families. Rather than feeling exposed, I felt validated, seen, understood. It was a profound sense of connection, a realization that I was not alone. Meanwhile, Maya and I were rebuilding our relationship, slowly, tenderly. We recognized how Mom had deliberately driven us apart through insidious comparison and favoritism, always pitting us against each other. I always envied how brave you were, Maya admitted during one of our new weekly phone calls. Our conversations now filled with a raw honesty. How you stood up to her, moved away, became your own person, even when it broke Mom's heart. And I envied how she loved you, I confessed. The words finally free. How she approved of your choices, celebrated your accomplishments. I saw the ease with which you navigated her world, and I just craved that acceptance. She controlled me in different ways, Maya said thoughtfully, a dawning realization in her voice. With praise instead of criticism. With approval instead of condemnation. But it was still control. Still about her needs, not mine. I'm only now recognizing it, Chloe. All those years, I just thought I was the easy child. The one who didn't cause trouble. I didn't see the manipulation. Liam and Daniel, my new brother-in-law and my fiancé, had formed their own unlikely alliance. Two strong men who loved the Thompson sisters, supporting each other through the shared trauma of our family crisis. They arranged a weekend getaway for the four of us at a secluded coastal cottage in Big Sur, far away from legal discussions and family drama. Walking along the rugged beach with Maya while our partners prepared dinner, the salty air and crashing waves a balm to my soul. I felt closer to my sister than ever before. It was a bond forged in fire, stripped bare of pretense. Do you think Mom will ever change? Maya asked, watching the waves roll in, her voice wistful. I don't know, I answered honestly. Personality disorders are incredibly difficult to treat, especially when the person doesn't fully accept their diagnosis or the need for help. It's a long, uphill battle, if it's even possible. Dad's filing for divorce, Maya said, her voice quiet. Did he tell you? I nodded, the news both shocking and profoundly unsurprising. He called me last week, after 40 years. I can't imagine how hard that decision was for him. He's looking at apartments in a new town, away from Beacon Hills, she continued. A faint, almost joyful smile touching her lips. Asked for my help choosing furniture. He's never made those decisions before, has he? Always let Mom dictate everything. He's finding himself, Maya, I said. A wave of affection for my quiet father washing over me, just a few decades late. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the gulls and the ocean. I've been thinking about the wedding, I finally said. The word no longer feeling tainted by Mom's shadow. Daniel and I are considering something smaller, more intimate, not the extravagant affair Mom was planning. God, no, Maya teased, a genuine laugh bubbling up. Definitely not that. Maybe just close friends and family, I continued, picturing it. On the San Francisco waterfront where he proposed. A simple ceremony, just us. I think that sounds perfect, Chloe, Maya said, squeezing my hand. Absolutely perfect. As legal proceedings continued for Mom, I started therapy, a crucial step in processing my childhood and the recent trauma. My therapist, a kind, insightful woman, specialized in adult children of narcissistic parents, helping me understand patterns I'd never recognized, coping mechanisms I'd unknowingly developed. You developed hypervigilance, she explained during one session, always watching for signs of disapproval, anticipating criticism before it came, sensing danger. That's why you sensed something was profoundly wrong with the wine when others might have missed it. Your survival instincts were highly tuned, constantly on alert. So my anxiety actually saved me, I asked, a profound paradox. Your awareness did, she corrected gently. And now you can channel that awareness more healthfully, without the constant fear, without the need to anticipate every potential threat. The preliminary hearing for Mom's case was scheduled for early September. I flew to Beacon Hills, Daniel by my side, to give my deposition. Mom would be present, our first encounter since the hospital confrontation. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her designer clothes replaced by something simple and beige, a uniform from the correctional facility. Her once perfectly styled hair lacked its usual sheen, falling limply around her face. Our eyes met across the conference room table, and I was surprised to feel a complex mix of pity and a strange, unfamiliar sadness, rather than the expected fear or anger. She was a broken woman, stripped of her power. Her lawyer had negotiated a plea deal. Guilty on reduced charges, simple assault, reckless endangerment, rather than attempted poisoning due to the diminished capacity argument. Mandatory psychiatric treatment in a secure residential facility, probation, and a permanent restraining order preventing contact with me unless I initiated it. It was as fair an outcome as possible, I thought. Consequences paired with the desperate need for treatment. When asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, I declined. What could I possibly say that would change anything now? My truth was already spoken. As we left the courthouse, a reporter, sensing the moment, called out, "Chloe, do you forgive your mother?" I paused, considering the question deeply, knowing my answer would be heard by thousands. "Forgiveness isn't a moment," I finally replied, my voice clear and steady. "It's a process, and right now I'm focused on healing, on building a new life." Back in San Francisco, Daniel and I resumed wedding planning, this time entirely on our terms. A small ceremony, 40 guests maximum, with Brooke as my maid of honor and Maya as a bridesmaid, now my closest confidant. No elaborate decorations, no society expectations, just an authentic celebration of our love, surrounded by the people who truly loved us back. "Are you inviting your mother?" Brooke asked hesitantly, while helping me choose a simple, elegant white dress that felt perfectly me. "No," I said without regret, the word firm and final. The restraining order prevents it, but honestly, I wouldn't anyway. This day needs to be free from that anxiety, from her shadow. It's for us. "And your dad?" she asked, a hopeful note in her voice. I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Yes. He's walking me down the aisle. He's different now, Brooke. Going to therapy himself, learning to be more present, to find his own voice. It's like meeting a new, braver version of my father." 6 months after the engagement party that changed everything, our lives had transformed in ways I never could have predicted. Mom was in a residential treatment facility, receiving the intensive psychiatric care she should have had decades ago. Dad was learning independence in his small Portland apartment, rediscovering himself after a lifetime under Mom's thumb. And Maya and I spoke almost daily, our relationship stronger, deeper, and more authentic through shared understanding and mutual respect. Daniel and I had emerged stronger too, our bond solidified by crisis. "You know," he said one night as we finalized our guest list, tucked into our cozy apartment, "I fell in love with you because of your strength, your resilience. Now I've seen exactly how truly strong you are. You faced your greatest fear, your greatest source of pain, and you chose yourself." I kissed him, grateful beyond words for his unwavering support, his unconditional love. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" "More than okay," he promised, pulling me closer. "We're going to be extraordinary. We're going to build a life filled with peace and genuine happiness." And for the first time in my life, I truly believed that future was possible. A life defined not by fear and approval seeking, but by genuine love and hard-won wisdom. On a perfect October afternoon, 6 months after the engagement party that fractured and then rebuilt my world, Daniel and I stood beneath a flower-covered arch on the San Francisco waterfront, the Pacific Ocean sparkling behind us. We exchanged vows, tears in our eyes, surrounded by the people who truly loved us. Brooke and Jessica beamed from the bridal party, while Maya stood proudly as my matron of honor, her relationship with me now built on unwavering trust and mutual respect rather than our mother's manipulations. Dad walked me down the aisle, sober in more ways than one. Weekly therapy and a support group for partners of people with personality disorders had helped him find his voice, his agency. When he placed my hand in Daniel's, he spoke clearly, his voice strong and steady. "I give my blessing to this union of equals." Simple words that acknowledged the healthy, reciprocal relationship Daniel and I had built, something he and Mom never had. Victoria Sterling was not present, physically or spiritually. The restraining order remained in effect, but more importantly, I had finally built the emotional boundaries I'd needed my entire life. She continued treatment at a private psychiatric facility, sending occasional letters through her lawyer. Some expressed remorse, others revealed she still couldn't fully accept responsibility for her actions. I read them, acknowledged them, and filed them away, no longer allowing her words to dictate my emotional state. After our honeymoon in Portugal, Daniel and I settled into our San Francisco apartment, planning a future based on mutual support and honest communication. We discussed having children someday, both committed to breaking the cycles of dysfunction that had shaped my childhood. "I'm terrified of becoming her," I admitted one night. A raw fear. "You won't," Daniel said with certainty, pulling me close. "You're already doing the work to make sure of that." The work he referred to was ongoing therapy, consistent boundary setting, and conscious awareness of inherited patterns. I learned that healing isn't a destination, but a practice, something that requires daily commitment and self-compassion. Maya and Liam visited regularly, our sisterhood flourishing now that we understood how we'd been pitted against each other. "It's like I have a new sister," Maya told me during one visit, her eyes shining, but with all our shared history intact. Just a healthier version. Dad called weekly, slowly becoming the father he could have been if he hadn't surrendered his agency to Mom's dominating personality. He joined a hiking club, was learning to cook, and had even begun dating, tentatively, awkwardly, but with genuine enthusiasm for this new chapter of his life. As for me, I found my voice professionally as well as personally. The article I wrote about family trauma and recovery was published in a major magazine, launching a series on mental health that resonated with thousands of readers. Messages arrived daily from people who saw their own family dynamics reflected in my story, people who felt less alone because I had shared my truth. "You've turned pain into purpose," my therapist observed during one of our now monthly sessions. "I had to," I replied, a profound conviction in my voice. Otherwise, what was it all for? The lesson I carried forward wasn't what I'd expected. It wasn't about villains and victims, or even forgiveness in the traditional sense. It was about understanding that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are themselves deeply wounded. Mom's behavior, while inexcusable, stemmed from untreated mental illness and likely generational trauma she never addressed. This understanding didn't erase the harm or obligate me to maintain unhealthy relationships. Instead, it freed me from the cycle of anger and hurt that had defined so much of my life. I could acknowledge her humanity while fiercely protecting my own well-being. I could wish her healing without sacrificing my own. The deepest lesson, though, was about trusting myself. If I hadn't listened to that instinct about the wine, that quiet voice warning something was wrong, the outcome could have been devastating. My mother had spent decades training me to doubt my perceptions, to prioritize her reality over my own, to believe that my intuition was simply anxiety. In that crucial moment, I chose to trust myself instead. And now I make that choice daily. I listen to my intuition. I honor my boundaries. I surround myself with people who see me clearly and love me completely. Sometimes family is who you choose, not who you're born to. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that hurt initially, but heal ultimately. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is acknowledge that a relationship is toxic, even when, especially when, it's with someone who should have loved you unconditionally. I don't know if Mom and I will ever have a healthy relationship. That depends entirely on her journey, her willingness to truly face herself, as much as on mine. What I do know is that I'm no longer waiting for her approval or living in fear of her criticism. My worth isn't determined by her perception. My happiness isn't contingent on her acceptance. That perhaps is the most profound freedom of all. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself from someone who was supposed to care for you? Has your intuition ever saved you from a dangerous situation? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, sharing our experiences helps others feel less alone in their struggles. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to trust their instincts and set boundaries, even with family. Thank you for listening, and remember, your story matters, your feelings are valid, and you deserve relationships that bring peace, not pain.